All right, welcome. So this is a quick presentation for those of you who are in need of accessing this information digitally about the final proposal presentation for 490. So as you know, we've been working this semester to position everyone as strongly and powerfully and clearly as possible to convince the MEA faculty. So all the teachers in this program will basically be watching your presentation, trying to find weaknesses and indicating what those are in the hopes to make the project as strong as possible, and then they'll make a determination or a recommendation to me that students are either prepared to continue to 491 or that they need to repeat 490. We've been doing this for a little over a year, and we've only had 2 students that did not actually go through, and it wasn't so much because this class was difficult, it was more that, along with the fact that they didn't have sound habits as students kind of across the board in other classes. So anyway, I'm sharing this information and put this presentation together so that you wouldn't be in that situation. So in terms of the way that it's going to work on the timeline side, the final presentation will be 7 to 10 minutes. You will do it in the way that you've done your other presentations, just longer and more detail. Don't go short, but if you have to go a little bit long, then keep it within 12 for sure. So we'll talk about the content of that presentation here shortly, whether you're doing the paper side or if you're doing the project side. So on 11.4, you need to have your the presentation uploaded to the class YouTube channel under the appropriate playlist, which I will provide. You can find it on Canvas, but I'll also send it out once again by email so that you've got that. The faculty will then review all of the video presentations, and then they'll take about a week to do that. And then on 11/11, you'll get so November the 11th, you'll get a notice from me to indicate what their findings were. And so, if there's work to if they have recommendations that rise to the level of modification, which is in about half of the cases, so it's pretty common, then I'll pass those along to you and say, these are the things that the faculty wants to see in there. Keep in mind that they are looking for weaknesses, but that's to identify those to you so you can patch those up and address those. Ultimately, this is all going in the direction that we want your work to represent what we do here in this School of Communication. And so it's going to, when we get to the end of 491, there'll be students, the best projects will be chosen for the senior showcase, and then we're going to invite professionals in to come and see those, and that's an informal sort of professional networking opportunity for you, for those students whose works have been chosen for the showcase. So it's all going in that direction. Just want to make sure you're clear on that. So a week after you submit on YouTube, then you'll get a notice from me about any changes that need to be made. And those, you'll have about 5 days to do the modification. So on 11/16, you can come in and do those modifications. So once again, the presentation is 7 to 10 minutes, uploaded to YouTube on 11/4, and then the faculty panel will have a week to but to assess and evaluate those. And on 11/11, I'll send out a notice of modification if the faculty finds that there are weaknesses that should be addressed, and you'll have 5 days to address those, and then resubmit the final presentation. Now on 11/23, the last day of class, is when the final draft of the proposal is due. So you will have already your draft of the proposal in advance of this because you've already done a 3-page draft, but we found that it's useful to have the written proposal have the benefit of this entire process, taking into account the faculty feedback and any extra work that may be involved, so that you've got that last week of class to go back, touch up the proposal, and in all cases, it will include that all-important one sheet. So now that you can see the timeline that we're talking about, I want to talk about the actual content of the proposal. And so the content will vary based on whether you are doing a project or a paper. And so 7 to 10 minutes, you can roughly divide these in terms of just time-wise. So you may have, for your overview of the project, 1 to 2 minutes, reviewing the research that you've done to understand the project in a deeper level than just something to upload onto YouTube, for example. You may be looking at 3 to 4 minutes, or say approximately 3 minutes. Description of the process, the project itself, perhaps another 3 minutes, and then going over your one sheet, 1 to 2 minutes. So this is a sample overview of how to divide, and this doesn't have to be done this way, but it's just a sample overview of how to divide this 7 to 10 minute presentation in a way that makes sense for your goals. And so what's actually included in these sections? Well, you'll want to, I'm going to consult a few notes of my own here, project proposal. All right, so you want to definitely give an introductory overview. An indication of what the relevance is, like in other words, why? Who cares? That's a question that you'll get when you invest a lot of time in something. People will be like, well, what's the point? So you need to be able to state that. So overview of the project itself, a relevant statement, why is this actually important? And then, what is your audience? Who is this intended for? If you're taking the paper route, you might replace the audience section with, what is your, the process that you're going to go through in order to actually conduct the research, because research paper implies that you'll have 5 sources of research going through this class, but then you'll need another 5 for the final paper in 491, which we'll talk about at the very end. In terms of the review of research, so that those of you writing papers for the class will do a sort of quick overview of 45 seconds or so of a sort of synopsis statement and relevant statement for each of the 5 that you've done in this class. So that's just a matter of going back over work that you've already done. But on the project side, it's really more of a matter of cherry picking. And so pick, the maybe 1, 2, or 3 of the articles that you read that were the most impactful, and show how those are going to relate to and provide sort of a guidance to understanding the meaning of the project. So we'll say most impactful articles that you read and how they guide understanding. Remember, the idea here, being in a college or a school of communication, is that this is a way to communicate an important message. And so we need a way to understand that process that is usually discovered in the second phase of the class, where we're doing all of the research article presentation. So that's what the second section is. Spend about 3 minutes, a significant chunk of time going through the most impactful, couple of most impactful articles, or like I said, if you're actually doing the research paper, you want to show that the 5 that you've chosen, maybe in less time, and then what your research will look like moving forward, because there's still the remaining 5 to get the 10 for the research papers. You'll need basically handle that like an annotated bibliography, where you've got all of your sources and then a brief description of the old synopsis and relevance thing that I have all my students do. Okay, so then we get down to the description of the process. And so this has to do with management of resources. So you got to remember, why we're doing this and who you're actually talking to. So you're talking to a panel of faculty that have a lot of experience in doing projects like this. Not everyone across the board will have experience doing your exact project, but somebody in that faculty, hopefully your sponsor, will have a greater depth of understanding of what's actually involved. So you actually have to show them a certain amount of detail about how you're going to be managing resources for your project. And so let me share a little bit more information about what I'm talking about here. So, one easy way to divide this could be in the traditional production divisions of pre-production, production phase, and post-production. And so what kind of resources will you need for each? So we're talking about definitely time is a huge resource. Personnel or human resources, equipment / technology, be it hardware or software. What will you need for each of these different ones? And then possibly money. If there are financial aspects to any of these, you need to show that you're aware of those in advance. And when you're able to speak to that in enough detail, it's going to have a huge persuasive impact on the panel of faculty sitting in front of you, that they're not giving you a green light to then get out in the field and be like, oh yeah, did I need that microphone for this? And then you lose a bunch of time trying to reserve it. That's the kind of train wreck that you need to be able to avoid, obviously, for this project. But imagine, doing that out in the field when you've already graduated and you're supposed to be, competent in this field. And so the description of the actual process, you need to get into a lot of detail here, like how you're going to manage each of these resources or others if you're aware of them across each of these different phases. That's how I would approach that, how I would recommend that you do it, but it's not the only way to do that. And then finally, you take all of that, this stage here, all of this kind of complex image of all of these resources, and you boil it down to a one sheet. And so a one sheet is a time embedded production calendar. So you're taking, all of the goals and steps that are required, and you're embedding them into a calendar. So imagine that you have a successful proposal, which most of you will, thank goodness. And so we get to the end of the semester. Now we're looking at basically from after Thanksgiving holidays on through to about the end of the middle of April. And so December, January, February, March, and half of April. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 4.5 months. That's actually a lot of time. What you don't want to do is lose half of January. You've already lost half of April because to get these things in the showcase and the judging process at the 491 level is parallel to what we do here. We have to actually cut the deadline to halfway through April so that the end of the semester you've got the showcase rolling. So if you wait until the semester starts to actually start your production, pre-production, for example, now you've got, a weekend, 2 weeks here and 2 weeks here. So that's 1 month, 2 and 3 months. Now you've gone from 4.5 down to 3, and you're losing a bunch of time. So you need to show how you're going to manage all of these steps with your resources in the time that's actually available to you. So the projects that have been the best and the strongest have actually started before Christmas holidays even break, and they're working on their script to get that sort of finalized, and they're already reaching out to if they've got a bunch of different people that are moving parts on the production side versus the post-production side, they're already starting to schedule them before classes even start. That's the kind of thing that you're going to need to be able to demonstrate that level of detail, but in a condensed one sheet where you've got, here's a sheet, I've got January, February, December, January, February, March, and then here's step 1 in pre-production, here's what I'm going to need, and they're due by this date, and then do the exact same thing all the way through. that shows a high concentration, efficiently communicated of a lot of information that, once again, is going to be persuasive. You've got to have your ducks in a row, and that's basically what we're here to make sure that you have all of that. Okay, so now we take this entire thing, and can you, you'll probably need to put it together and rehearse it once or twice, but can you get it into, imagine that you max it out at 2, 5, 8, and 10. That's perfect. Once again, don't go below 7, but you can go above 10, just not above 12. So that's, 7 to 12 is your sweet spot there. So don't sweat the time if it's a little bit long. Try not to, 15 is going to be just too much. You got to be more efficient than that. Okay, so that's that's the timeline for the end of the semester. This is all about the 490 proposal presentation to get you through 490 on into 491. These are my recommendations of how you organize your time. You want to hit these points. You can do it in your own personal and creative way if you want to, but just remember the points that I'm talking about how to persuade people. Okay, so I'm looking over the vast audience now. Do I have any, yes, I see your hands back there. Any questions? Anyone? Okay. Well, there's too many for me to possibly field. I'm going to run out of hard drive space. So that's actually a joke, because I'll show you outside of my fortress of plexiglass. I have Cameron. Yes. Who came from a near medical emergency. Probably not true, but he made it. And the university's been closed for a hurricane, and he's like battling the elements. Got to make it to Dr. Linden's class. So, do you have a question?
A few, but I mean that can wait a little bit if you want.
Well, your question may be, we may have questions that other students may have your question too. So go ahead.
Well, right now, mine and Tim's main issue is just getting we had a good hour-long meeting about a week ago, and we got. Our main problem right now is just getting a solid script down, because until we have the script,
yes,
you can't really plan much of anything else. And so we're trying to get that nailed down.
Okay.
So as a rough
okay.
script.
So this is, and that's a really good question that I think everybody could benefit from. You're kind of presenting a dream scenario in sorts that's also realistic. So everybody that's involved in the process, that's on the faculty level, realizes that what you present is going to go through changes. We'll encounter sort of the reality of life and these inconveniences. Things have to be rescheduled. So it's not as if you're going to be policed that exactly this happens. So in a situation where you've got a script that is sort of, going to be the first sort of domino that falls that the other ones are going to fall as a result of, what I would recommend that you do is allow for your best understanding of what the different phases of the process are going to require, but go ahead and imagine that that everything is going to fall sort of into line, as opposed to in the best situation, when would the script be done, and what sorts of location, personnel, and equipment needs would the realization of that script require. So the pre-production, you can imagine the script would be basically script oriented, and then you want that done by a certain amount of time. Then how long are you thinking about for production versus post-production, right? And so then you start to get in the ability to be like, okay, well, I'm looking at 5 months. If I can get the script done by the time classes start, and I'm ready to go at the end of January with the production, and we do, say, 6 weeks, 1, 4, and then into the beginning of March, does 3 weeks in March and 2 weeks in April allow enough time for the editing process? And that could be a yes if you don't have too much, if you're in the kind of 7 to 10 minute video total length. And so that's kind of how I would approach that, yeah.
The way we've been talking about how we're going to have to do it, because if we did it with just a pre-production, production, post-production, I would be heavily screwed, because you can't do any audio until we have edited scenes to do the audio to.
Right.
So we're going to be trying to work in parallel, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to record a scene, edit it. He's He's gonna send it to me. I'll start working on the audio and
Good.
whatever composition is necessary.
Okay.
And then next week we'll start working on the next scene and so on and so forth.
Okay, very good question. Okay, so how does this impact best practice for audio? So audio being part of the post-production then obviously means that you would be shortening the production phase from 6 weeks to, you may need 3 weeks for audio. And so where do you make that time up? So that's a really good question. And so you can make that time up. You just get the script approved before Christmas.
That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to have the script done by this weekend.
Right, so you're buying time by, but you have to realize this is the exact questions that you need to be asking that'll show that it's not pie in the sky, that this is an issue, right? You've got a limited amount of time. The audio being at the tail end is going to extend post-production, and so you've got to make the time up. And so you're pushing to get things that will work. So you're pushing to get the script approved so that your production can be wrapped up earlier, which will give you the time that you need. And so once again, it's not as if it has to go exactly this way, but you need to show that you've encountered these questions and that you've given your best shot. So you've got a realistic estimate of how your management of these resources in these phases over this time actually has a shot. And then when you get into it, then that's when the real fun starts, because you're going to be like treading water, man, But that's the nature of, that's the coping skills that are required in this industry. You map it out as realistically and as hopefully as you can, and then you go for it, and it's like it's sink or swim, And with every time you don't sink, you get stronger, And then that project starts to speak for itself to a wider audience, and with any luck, you can build a name for yourself, and so you're no longer a contracted sort of project by project worker. Over time, then you build a name, you're actually taking calls, you know what I mean? Yeah, so anyway, thanks for those questions. I'm gonna go ahead and end this so it's not too long, and then we can talk some more.